repeat. Yeah, we've been live for 13 seconds, mate. Hey guys, I didn't see you there. I was just playing stuff. It's not real guns, just like a toy thing that I got. I went to play some live poker in London, then I came back and I've decided that, hey, I better finish the intro because the video is coming out in a few days. The 5 plays that I recommend adding to your game in this video today are not just merely going to give you a better chance at an upward sloping graph, a higher number, your BB per 100, or a feeling of dominance at the poker table. These 5 things are going to enhance your performance in the gene pool. You're going to be better at finding a mate, you're going to bash rivals out of the way more successfully, and you're going to create really successful offspring. Centuries and millennia from now, your descendants will be beating 16NL thanks to you, thanks to the fact that you watched this video, and thanks to the fact that you watched it all the way to the end, and thanks to the fact that you smashed the like button and left a quick comment. Another thing that is sure to help your poker playing descendants is, of course, the Carrot Poker School. Unlike exploitative courses, trends, or fads, the Carrot Poker School is based on permanent theoretical truth. It can never become obsolete because the axioms of poker which ground this course, they are known, they are permanent, they are solved for, and the Carrot Poker School explains them and makes them easily digestible to you. Hybrids exist, and they exist because of the very phenomenon that fold equity is useful before the river. On the river, fold equity is less useful when you have a medium hand because villain just folds generally worse hands and calls better. But on the turn, they can call with worse hands, they can fold better hands, and they can fold hands that are live. Check out on carrotcorner.com. Let's get to today's video. Guys, there's some spots in poker that are so insanely profitable that I almost feel dirty telling you about them. Like I'm betraying the secret covenant of professional poker players, the minority that know how to absolutely print EV in a situation like this one. This play works so often that I've decided to call this first weapon that we're going to add to our arsenal today bluffs that always work. That's right. And no, I don't mean literally always. Sometimes you run into some anomaly player that just decides to call you or has a way stronger hand than you expect. But right here, blind versus blind, part of my bankroll challenge, 100 Russian cash GG with Jack 10 off in the big blind. This is one such spot where bluffing the river almost always works for the sizing I chose. Let's have a look. So small blind opens 3 BBs here, don't have any reads on the player. We defend in the big blind with Jack 10 offsuit. The flop is 7-9-5, villain goes for 1/3 pot. I think in general people are betting too often here. If you look this one up in your solver, you'll probably see that it's checking the vast majority of the time. That's because this sort of board is extremely good for the big blind. It catapults the big blind's low connected, offsuit and suited combos right up over and above the overcards and overpairs of the small blind. So when you have this catapulting flop that just takes a bunch of rubbish low cards and sends them into the poker heavens and makes them all nutted and draws to the nuts and stuff like that, big blind does well. So this is already probably overdone. I'm a fan of call here. I don't mind raise as well. They're both fine. The turn is the 10 of hearts, and villain goes for this sizing. So this spot's kind of interesting. This is a turn that's okay for both ranges. It's probably slightly more. It's probably eating away at the EV of small blind's overpair combos slightly more. I'd imagine the value region here to be ace 10, king 10 plus overpairs, 2-pair sets, straights, and then a bunch of bluffs. I think this call is not an amazingly happy one, but definitely one that we have to make. We reach the 6 of diamonds river and villain instantly checks. This check was fast enough that I can't imagine there was much processing going on. Even if you're an experienced poker player that processes things relatively quickly, it's still going to take you a few seconds to decide to slow play the nut flush in this spot, if you even ever want to do that. While you can get someone to bet an 8 here for value, this is a spot that really doesn't get bluffed very often at all. If you think about our range, there are just very few hands that have whiffed here that have low showdown value that would want to bluff. Of course, in theory, we're going to start turning some hands like a pair of 7s, I would imagine, into a bluff here. Or potentially some hand like Queen Jack is a more natural one, I guess. But if you think about our range, almost everything has got there. Flushes have got there. Any 8x is a straight. Lots of stuff is 2-pair here. it's really difficult for big blind to have nothing. Now here's the thing. I can hear what you guys are thinking. You're thinking, well, actually, you've got showdown value, so lol, you shouldn't bluff with showdown value, actually. But there's something really wrong with that. There's something very deeply embedded into that is flawed. And it's the assumption that it's good enough to settle for a decent amount of the pot in EV. It's good enough to settle for plus EV. Yes, checking is really plus EV. When you check behind here, all of villain's bluffs, all of the king queen and king jack and jack four suited, all of these hands have whiffed and they've given up, and you're going to win against them. Some of them have continued bluffing. Of course, we're not on that node against them. But yeah, we probably win here about 25, 30, 35% of the time, something like that. We have a lot of showdown value. But we should note that we don't beat any of the hands that villain was value betting on the turn. We had a bluff catcher on the turn. Villain is not potting the turn unless they're just a bad player with 9-8 or 10-6 or something like that. That would be a polarization mistake. So although we're winning really frequently here, how often do we get called when we do this? How often does this get called against a person who has just bet 1/3 on flop, potted turn, and snap checked river on this run out? How often does this get called? If you answered 20% of the time, too high, in my opinion. When I say bluffs that always work, what I really mean to imply is that this bluff works more than 90% of the time. It has to work a lot, because we are betting about 150% of the pot here, and this bluff is going to have to work a lot. When you bet 1.5x pot, when you overbet like this, you need 60% fold equity just to break even. In order to make this bet better than checking, we need even more than that, because remember, checking was plus EV, so 60% fold equity here would be a disaster. It'd be a really bad bet if that's all that we had. But I think actually we have like 90. The timing is important. It's not essential for this play, but I would say the snap check is quite different to a tank check here. And for two reasons. One, the tank check is going to be a bluff that's given up more often because villain was deliberating bluffing. And therefore your showdown value is probably even higher against a tank check than it is against a snap check, somewhat counterintuitively. And then the other thing that's going on is if villain tank checks, they will have more slow plays. So basically the tank check is a much more polarized range than the snap check, which is a much more merged range. And against the snap check, our fold equity begins to soar, and our showdown value is worse than it is against a tank check. Does that mean I wouldn't make this play against a tank check? Maybe, maybe not. It's a different thing. But I still think that this line yields a ton of fold equity anyway. I think hands like aces, kings, queens, jacks, ace 10, king 10, these hands are just almost never calling, and they're the bulk of villain's range. So in summary, guys, look out for spots where you think almost all of villain's range is folding, and feel free to turn down a shit ton of showdown value in those spots, because we are not in the business of settling for plus EV. We're not in the business of saying, we can win sometimes by checking, so it's bad to bluff. What a stupid thing to say. That's true when your fold equity is just normal, where it's not more than your break-even point. That's completely true that you should check when you think you can win 10 or 12 or 15% of the time. But not here. Not here, guys. Okay, let's have the grand reveal. What did villain do? Countdown editor from
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Villain folded. As they will. 93, 94% of the time. Spots where bluffs always work. Look out for them. But don't come crying to me when you bluff in some stupid spot and you're like, but Pete said it would always work. You've got to hand read, guys. You've got to identify the capped fragility and the disgust of putting money into the pot, especially this much money, in this spot. Of course, we're over bluffing. We're saying we have a flush here, probably, with this sizing. And no, we don't have the diamond blocker, guys, but no, we don't care, because we're not GTO nerds. But that's fine. We should overbluff in spots that are massively overfolded. That's exactly what we should do. Anyway, next hand. So this, guys, is a concept that I like to call trapping weaker players in 3-bet pots. It's a very common pattern. So it goes like this. Someone opens. Someone calls. We decide to squeeze with kings. The recreational player that started with 65.68 big blinds here in the cutoff goes for the peel. And we get a flop of deuce 8 deuce. The 282, as it's called. I believe the 282 is a type of plane. Or is that the 747? It's one of those. So we check. How many of you, show of hands, lazily c-bet 1/3 here? How many of you? Literally raise your hand right now if you do that. You're sat in the living room with your spouse, and you raise your hand, and your spouse is like, what the hell are you doing? And you're like, I'm owning up to a bad play to Pete Clark, even though he can't see me, it feels like he can. That's what you tell your other half. So we go for the check here, and this happens. And the reason that we check here is because villain's range, when they are a short-stacked recreational player that's just called a squeeze, is going to be absurdly wide quite a lot of the time. It's going to be volatile. And not just their range, but there's this thing called low SPR madness. It's like a plague. As soon as the SPR, the stack to pot ratio, gets below a certain point, it's a well-known fact that recreational players feel magnetized to the pot, attached, their fight instinct goes, the adrenaline is going, that's pulsing through their veins, and they cannot help but make a play. Like this. There are a few categories of hand here that your opponent can have. Before anything happens on the flop, they have firstly, hands that will call if you start betting, and will likely bet if you start checking. What you do against those hands is relatively unimportant because you get their money either way most of the time in most situations. Then your opponent has the sort of hand that will invest by calling your bets but not by betting themselves. Those hands don't really matter here because we can bet against them later. Okay, if you run into like a really placid player who happens to have fours here and you check and they're not the kind of player that gets magnetized to the pot and gets itchy with fours, and they check back, well, one, that's really rare because those players actually would have folded like fairly often to the squeeze because they're just more timid. But also you can probably get their money later unless the turn and river run out something horrible. So there's some downside there, maybe, but not a big one. But then comes the region of trash. Jack 9 of clubs, 9-7 of diamonds, ace 3 off. Now, how do these hands behave if you bet? Well, sometimes they spew anyway, because the player's just that chaotic and insane and stupid that they shove 9-7 of diamonds when you bet and you call and you're like, oh, I played it very well. Oh, yes, I induced. The problem is, you didn't induce as much as you could have. So when you check here, you open the gate to all of those hands. You dangle some semblance of fold equity onto the table and you say, villain, maybe you can take this pot from me if you do something stupid. Maybe it will work. Maybe I'm just check folding here. Maybe you'll put my ace queen into a tough spot. If I had ace queen here, I'd probably still call this, but I wouldn't be very happy. This just looks maniacal. So obviously with kings, we decide to call. Imagine I folded here. Imagine I was like, this is just under bluffed, guys. Like, you can't call here. And then got you all to go away and fold those splits. I bet you would as well. That's so silly. Come on now. Turn is ace of diamonds. And unfortunately, we lost to the ace-7 of clubs. So, long story short, even if you do everything right, poker will still punch you in the face. Fuck poker. That's the moral of the story. But no, in seriousness, to summarize, there are regions of villain's range when it's a short-stacked recreational player, a wide combinatoric region, a region that spans many combinations of hole cards, is going to be the garbage region. There is no urgency for you to value bet. There are not many hands that invest more against the bet than against the check. The inverse is true, that there are many hands that invest a lot more frequently and a lot more money against the check than against the bet. So I hate to say it, guys, and this is a banned term, but for those of you that like to say target, because you have been sadly indoctrinated into the cult of targeting, well, we're targeting loads of air here. But you don't just target things arbitrarily, you target the most abundant stuff. If you must use targeting, and I'd urge you not to, I would plead with you not to, please use it against the bulk of villain's range. Use it against very vast regions of villain's range, not against some random hand. Oh, I bet small to target fives. What a stupid thing to say. What a stupid thing to do. The bulk of villain's range is like Jack 9 off and stuff like this. So if you must use target, target that. But rather just play against what villain's range is overall and try and maximize your EV against the whole thing by thinking about which hands are more common than others. That's how to do it. Okay, on to point number 3. This is called slow playing invincible hands at low SPRs. The lower the SPR, that's the stack to pot ratio, the amount of money that's in the pot compared to the amount of money that's in the stack. When there's less money in the stack in relation to the pot than normal, it doesn't take very much more investing to get the rest of the money in. That means if you don't value fold equity, if you don't need your opponent to fold lots of hands that are doing well against you and you don't need to get value urgently, then you can just sit back and wait, especially if your hand is super invincible and you wouldn't even mind if villain improved. So here is such a spot. We have the 3-4 suited, we open, we get 3-bet by small blind. Maybe you're not meant to call here. But I don't care, because I like playing pots. I like being in position against people. I like the 34 suited, especially of hearts. Let's play the 34. If your solver tells you this is a fold, ask it by how much. Because remember, the solver is like a stickler for the rules. It's like, you must fold here. It's like, well, how much do I lose if I peel? Probably very little, right? I would think. Even if it's a lot, I'll just make up some BS about skill edge and say I can get away with it. It's fine. You can do that too, guys. You can just say you're better than everyone. It's easy. Once you say that, like, nothing can touch you. It's fine. So they check. We go for a small bet here, and they decide to raise to 25.07. Good play by villain. More and more people are realizing that in this spot, you want to play large bets and check raises and less small bets. So this is a good play from a reg in this game. If you go all in here, you don't deserve to play the game. You're an absolute disgrace. And I know none of you go all in here. I know that literally none of you do, so it's okay. I know I've not just called any of you a disgrace because none of you go all in here. Not you guys. Maybe someone else's viewers, maybe some other channel's viewers, probably Eastie's viewers go all in here. Or Weasel's viewers go all in here. I think the viewers of those two guys would go all in here, but not our community. No fucking chance. You can tell them I said that. I don't care, man. 6 of clubs. Check. And this is the key spot, where check is just better. Why? Well, villain's range on the flop is polarized to hands that can bluff the river, like king, queen, king, jack, random overcards, and overpairs. If we check back here, what's going to happen is that an overpair is going to jam the river for value, and a bluff will sometimes also jam the river. If we bet here, yes, we will get the money from the overpair, but we will not get any more money from the bluffs. Even if we bet small, I think a lot of overcards are folding here. If you have a hand like 9s, it's okay to bet quarter pot here because you actually welcome that fold equity. You're like, cool, okay, the pot's really big. I can bet another 16 big blinds and I can make you fold a bunch of equity. I never have to deal with the situation where you river me and win the pot, or the situation where you river me and jam and then I lose all of my stack. So when you have 9s here, or you have to fold and you get bluffed sometimes, whatever, they're all bad situations, right? So when you have 9s here, you can bet small. You don't have to in theory. But when you have trips, you shouldn't. Not theoretically and not in practice. Okay, maybe you can bet tiny here. Maybe you can bet like 9 big blinds here. That's the other option. But check is really nice. Check enables all of the overcard combos to bluff the river or hit a pair that they value bet and then you stack them. So this is like the classic, like back in Doyle's day, RIP Doyle. People used to say stuff like, I didn't think you had anything, so I'll let you catch up. Terrible accent, but they say things like that, right? Anyway, this is a good check. Low SPR, invincible hand. This is a slow play. This is the exact spot you should slow play in all of poker. Unfortunately, villain decides to keep giving up. Not too phased by this river. I'd be absolutely shocked if they decide to play a flush this way, given our range is condensed and showdown value heavy now after we bet call flop. Easy jam, just hoping that they've decided to take a weird line with aces or something. Not this time, no dice, but it's not about the results. It's all about the fact that this is a great turn check, both theoretically and in reality as well. It's probably even clearer a check exploitatively than it is theoretically, but both approaches would tell you to check here. This one is a pre-flop weapon, and it's called the pre-flop 4-bet jam. We're quite accustomed to our 4-bets being 21 big blinds, 19 big blinds, 26 big blinds, depending on the size of the pot. This player is playing some kind of the rake on GG is bad and I'm going to negate it by 3-betting to 5x because I'm really, really clever. But actually, there's just like 4 uncapped ranges to act after you, and this decimates the number of combos you're allowed to 3-bet in a situation like this. I'm almost certain this is not a good strategy, even if it does have some benefits. So something can have some benefits to it, but not be a good overall strategy, and I believe this is such a case. So yes, and also you get raked pre-flop as well. Maybe this is just a bad player. I don't know who this is. This is stupid sizing. This player cold calls, definitely a bad player, I would think, cold calling a 3-bet of this size. I'm not hugely against cold calling tiny 3-bets sometimes. Like, I actually did cold call a 6 big blind 3-bet in a video that you watched a couple of days ago, if you're a loyal disciple of the channel. That's the ace-king hand. I'm not a big fan of that play, by the way, but I think it's alright. But this is probably not alright. This is just too big an investment to put in this spot, not closing the action, so we just jam. And the advantage to this play is that, well, if you 4-bet here, you have to make it like 30 or whatever anyway. One idea is that you don't really love 4-bet bluffing in this spot anyways. It's not a high fold equity spot. If you go 30 bigs, it's probably just underperforming, so you never really want to bluff. And you just allow people to realize equity unnecessarily. Jam here is totally fine. There's already 20 big blinds in the middle. You can play splash pots like this as well. When there's like 10 or 20 BBs in the middle, you can just shove pre-flop. In GTO, the hands that you're allowed to jam, okay, this is a bit of a weird situation, but say your head's up and you just get 3-bet, and you're considering playing jam, like small blind 3-bets you to 11 big blinds, and you're considering jamming 100. You can do that with queens, kings, and ace-king, generally. These are the hands that you're allowed to jam. Everything else is too much of an investment, and aces is obviously just terrible to jam, because it wants to encourage action. It doesn't need that fold equity. Kings, ace-king, and queens all benefit pretty strongly from fold equity. That's the theoretical justification. The exploitative justification, in my mind, is that when you jam a hand like kings or queens, people think you have ace-king, like very, very frequently. And they will call you with 10s and 9s and jacks and 8s and stuff like this. So you actually get to get all the money in pre-flop against hands like 9s sometimes by taking this play. And if they do call you, who cares? Like, you have ace-king the rest of the time, so you're super live. So I would highly encourage you to build a 4-bet jam range over a 3-bet with queens, kings, and ace-king. And in some exploitative situations, other hands too. But here I think we're just going to jam queens, kings, and ace-king. Aces, of course, we're going to make it 28 or 30 or 29 or something. And then other hands we're just going to be calling, like 10s here, we're just going to be calling. I don't hate jam with jacks here either, by the way. It's not horrible. So we do get it in. And we end up running it against this hand. How boring. Chop chop. I did actually lose a pot today where I got it in with ace-king off against ace-king suited, and they made a flush. And I had to like slowly reveal the flush card on GG. It was like slowly stick these needles into my eyes and show me that spade on the river. It was ace-king of spades as well that I got it in against earlier. That was painful, man. All in EV, not so good today. Not so good a day for the all-ins. But this one we did manage to escape without getting stacked, which was nice. Okay, one more thing to show you. So this is a very common thing, and you might do this already, but you probably don't do it big enough. One of my favorite plays right now, one of my fave things to do overall in poker, is attack capped ranges against populations that are not very good at protecting their checking ranges. So in this spot, we flat the queen 6 out of the big blind against button, pretty normal. This comes on the turn. You don't need like the massive powerhouse draw like this to use this play. I've started using like the large overbet. This can be like 2x pot, it can be 2.5x pot, it can be 1.5. It can be lots of different sizes. This is just a theoretical tool that's really good. You can also lead smaller here. Like, you can have multiple sizes in this spot if you want. I wouldn't personally stress like this whole, you must simplify your game, you must make your own strategy simple or you will lose lots of EV. No, you won't. Just shut up. You don't suddenly just lose EV because you add a bet size to your strategy that's actually good with the hand that you have. Like, if I add a block bet here and I decide to block with like ace 5, there's nothing wrong with that. I don't just get butchered because I added a new layer of complexity, but you've made your strategy overly complex. Oh no. How will I cope with the fact that I've block bet the fucking ace 5 and my opponent's folded? What a huge mistake. So if you come across these boffins, if you come across these nerds on your poker travels, guys, they stop you on the road and they're like, can I just double check there that you've only got one size in your toolkit in every street? Just, you know, middle finger to the boffins, yeah? Alright, so this works. This always works. Not always. It works way more than it should because people are too capped. They don't protect themselves. Here's another example. Ace 7, the same hand that whale jammed the flop against us with in the other hand. We check. They check, 4 of hearts, bomb. These are all really high equity draws. You don't actually need a really, really high equity draw to do this. You just need something reasonable. The reason this is so good is that people are very bad at checking queens here, even though you could sometimes check a hand like aces or kings, or maybe queens. I think jacks you always bet. So yeah, this works well. You can do this with quite a few different bluffs. Hope you enjoyed this video of me wielding a rifle in a scorched battlefield. I've always wanted to wield a rifle in a scorched battlefield, so I was glad I got to do that for you today on the thumbnail. If you like the content here at Carrot Corner, this is of course just a taster. Do check out the Carrot Poker School for my absolutely comprehensive foray into the objective truth about poker theory, about how poker works. If you want to give your game the bedrock that it deserves, do check out the Carrot Poker School. And if that's a bit outside of your budget and you want a little quick fix, a boost to your win rate, an injection of extra BB per 100, then check out the course called Cash Injection on Carrot Corner. 10 easy to implement exploits. Check it out. Like the video. Please subscribe. Talk to me. Let me know what bits you liked. What bits did you not like? What were your favorite moments? What are you going to take from this? Let me know. Be happy to read and reply to your comments underneath. I will see you back here for the next video on this channel. Have fun using these weapons and take care. Bye for now.